Meow! Hoople's cat. Enjoying a coffee. Have you ever considered that some videos you might watch on YouTube may not exactly be true? Certainly, famine would be a terrible, terrible thing. Famine has been a constant throughout human history, human evolutionary history. Has actually been driven by famines, mass migrations before recorded history, and certainly mass migrations in recorded history. Certainly America and Ireland would have been very different if it hadn't been for the potato famine of 1846 to 48, which drove a vast number of the Irish to emigrate and to create new lives in places like the United States, Canada and Australia. So there was historic flooding this spring, this end of the winter, in an American state called Nebraska. Now Nebraska is actually important agriculturally in the United States. It's the third most important state, produces about 6 to 8% of agricultural produce that Americans sell. And over time their main output in Nebraska is corn, but there's some wheat and some beef and other things. And the flooding was historic. Now the videos online have focused on the destruction to the stored crops that were stored because the farmers couldn't find a market for them because the prices are too low. So they'd actually stored most of the last couple of years corn crop and wheat crop because the prices are too low, because there's oversupply for the people that can buy food. So most of those stored crops have been destroyed in about half of Nebraska. And the fields have been inundated, and because of water policy in the United States and other countries, the water that's inundated the fields is mostly polluted water, which is a shame because generally speaking, flooding brings in new life and nutrition to soils and revigorates them. And you can see from a lot of the pictures that a lot of the areas that are flooded are actually close to rivers and are actually floodplains. Human beings these days tend to build houses on floodplains and then get upset when they flood. You see this all the time. But I think the key message for me on this one is, why is people online focusing on food price rises, dramatic food price rises because of the Nebraskan floods, when there's absolutely no evidence that food prices will rise because of that? Anybody that's prepping and concerned about famine really should be looking at future commodity prices. It's the clearest signal going. Any capitalist and any Marxist will tell you that the future trading at Chicago and other exchanges on future prices of wheat and corn and pigs and you name it, they trade and they figure out how much it's going to be, what supply to demand will be in the future, and they set the price now based upon their expectations. And food prices have slightly risen or haven't risen at all due to Nebraska floods. And yet there's a lot, we've been inundated with a lot of videos about flooding causing price rises, which will cause instability, etc., etc. And yet there's no grain of truth to that. Not a grain of truth to that. What will happen, and what is happening, is that food prices will continue to rise for two main reasons. Fossil fuels are becoming more and more difficult to extract and are becoming more and more expensive. And that's going to continue, which is why, even if you don't believe that the historic flooding in Nebraska has got anything to do with human-caused climate change, which clearly it does, but if you don't feel that, that's fine. But the dependence on fossil fuels will continue to drive food prices upwards. What we all forget is historically food prices are incredibly low and have been for about the last 40 years or so. And food prices will rise again as a percentage of income. As a percentage of income historically, what you would expect to spend on food would be about 40% of your net income. Most people are nowhere near that. Now the very poor are, obviously, right? But most of us are nowhere near that. So when you go to the grocery store and you're earning $2,000 a month and you're spending $800 on food, that's about what historically you'd expect to. The flooding in Nebraska is not going to cause price rises with food this summer or next summer. If it was, you would see it already in the future commodity prices. And as you can see, there isn't. There are other trends. But what I'm saying to people is what you need to do is do your own research. Keep an eye on commodity prices. It's very interesting. Many, many years ago, I was studying economics at university. I didn't go in for my exams because I was too stoned. And I became a nurse, which was great for me in the long run, but at the time was a little bit, what have I done? But I used to get what they call blue books from the United Kingdom government, which looked at historic trends and future trends and stuff like that. And one of the things I found out in one February in the early 80s was that white beans were actually going to have a huge price rise due to the crop failure in America. And I actually bought massive amounts of baked beans, Heinz baked beans, and I paid 4p, I believe, a tin. And by the end of that summer, they were 28p a tin. So I actually saved some money, but I was pretty poor at the time, and baked beans was one of my staples. So looking at future trends is a useful thing. One of the other things you might want to do if you're concerned about famine is store food. And I think Nebraska's got a good message for us on that one. The message for that is store your food in ways that flooding won't destroy. Because flooding is becoming historic every year. Wildfires are historic every year. Human-caused climate change, and this will incredibly get worse, as will periods of very freezing cold and ice coming out of nowhere. Province of Quebec had 300,000 plus people with no electricity in early April due to an ice storm and a windstorm. That happens, it's natural. What is unnatural is that the climate is becoming much more unstable. Talk about grand solar minimums and polar shifts, all you like, and planet Nibiru if you like. But the bottom line is it's because we're burning fossil fuels. We're burning hundreds of millions of years of stored solar energy that was trapped in plants and animals and compressed and became fossil fuels, and we're burning it. And it's releasing carbon dioxide, and we're also producing nitrous oxide, and we're also reducing methane and some sulfides. And what we're doing is we're basically entrapping more and more of the solar energy that hits the Earth, so the global temperature is rising. Which clearly it is, and I'm still stunned that people are claiming it isn't, when clearly it is, and I'm not even arguing that one, just look it up. And yes, it all derives from the sun. We're in a natural cooling cycle, and we've been in it for quite some time. And the worst of a natural cooling cycle will drop global temperatures by 0.06 centigrade. And that actually would make a huge dramatic effect on food production and climate, just that little bit. The unfortunate thing is we're up by 1 centigrade or 1.7 centigrade, depending where you set the baseline, because of industrial burning of fossil fuels, because of chopping down of trees, because of paving concrete and asphalt and putting buildings up over large parts of the Earth's surface. Almost 8 billion human beings living like we do, and not as bad as us for most people, but we're consuming. China's consuming more and more beef, etc., etc. More and more car ownership, more and more oil being burned. So you can look at this and say, well, that is not true, humans have no effect on the climate. But realistically speaking, in 2019, what you're doing is you're arguing that the Earth is flat. It's clearly not true. It's clear that we are affecting the climate. The only real argument is what to be done about that. What's to be done about that is not to put out fear porn videos saying that food prices are going to spike this summer because of flooding in Nebraska. That's not the issue. It's not going to spike food prices this summer in North America. But if we keep getting flooding like this year after year, that will spike food prices, and we will have famines. And it will be because we willfully decided to ignore the fact that the Earth is getting hotter. So there's more moisture in the atmosphere, and when it comes down, it's coming down in vast quantities very quickly, both in the summer and in the winter. And the further point to this is that we will experience more and more radical droughts during the summer periods in large areas of the United States. California is particularly at risk from this, and California is the single most important state for food production. The other kind of fun issue with this one for me is, I suffer from it, Mr. Bear suffers from it, so does Becky, Kitty doesn't, is obesity. Obesity is probably the #1 food-related problem in North America right now. It's causing large amounts of death, it's causing large amounts of suffering. It is almost always avoidable, despite what people claim. I can eat less and I can exercise more, I won't be as obese, but lifestyle, blah, 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 you get entrapped in a lifestyle. So it's Saturday and I'm going to go out for a walk today with Kitty for an hour or so, and I'm starting my regime. We did a little bit of fasting yesterday and we're going to do that once a week, and we're generally speaking it's time for me to shed the extra fat, get the fat away, and then start jogging again. That's my response to Nebraska Floods, is to get myself fitter so if a famine occurs it won't hurt me as badly. I've be more energy to actually grow crops of my own, to also look at my food supply to make sure that my food supply is flood proof, and my stored food supply, make sure that's flood proof. So that's the message from this, is look around, look at commodity prices if you're concerned about food. They're very, very sensitive. If you're concerned about oil prices, also look at oil commodity prices. One of the things that people seem to attach to prepping, if you look at search on YouTube, is gold and silver, platinum, precious metal prices. Apparently that's something to do with prepping. I totally disagree with that, but that's an entirely different subject. But look at the future commodity prices for precious metals, and then look at the number of videos out there that said silver would like triple or double this summer. These people are lying to you. Now, they may not be lying to you directly, they may believe what they're saying. Like when people put out videos saying that there's going to be mass price rises because of Nebraska floods, they might believe that, but they believe that because they haven't actually researched it. They're basing that on evidence, probably from YouTube. Whenever you can, click behind the headline, click behind the video. If you're interested in the video topic, have a little look, be a little bit skeptical. You guys are very good at being skeptical about human-caused climate change and about government interventions. Some of you aren't quite so skeptical about fear porn videos, and perhaps you should be. Anyway, that's all from me. Nice coffee, and Mr. Bear and Becky, and we're waiting Kitty to come back from yoga. And remember, in SHTF, if you don't prep, tomorrow will be worse than today. So get prepping and be a little bit more skeptical about some things, okay? Toodles.